Hey everybody, Brian here from quantlabs.net. Okay, so I want to just first talk about my experience with Qt. It didn't last very long. It's too, how shall we say, too restrictive, too constricting. For instance, trying to be able to put in your code with Qt, and I've been forewarned on this. I kind of like bypassed it, but at least I've experienced it firsthand now. For instance, if you're using the Qt creator, try to implement Redis code with the high Redis, which can apparently import a C library. No go. You get all kinds of errors. It's really wonky. It's really ugly, and just seems to be that the Qt creator is just too restrictive in that. So I tried out the SQL part of my SQL or with the Qt creator. It only supports like Postgres, MySQL, ODBC, and a few others. Very limiting, and SQL8, but not the NoSQL. I didn't want to go through any of the weird problems that I had with the what do you call it? Just bastardized code. It's too inflexible and causes too many problems. If there's never a update in one of your third-party libraries outside the Qt, or let alone the Qt creator, I'm sure it will really knock off your future code and probably break stuff along the way. So I just felt it wasn't safe to proceed with Qt. So my other option was to use this wxWidgets. Now, I was a little daunting at first because I haven't heard a whole lot about it, but when I tried it out, I will need to say something here, because this framework is true open source as far as I know, not as restrictive. It's free, so you got some good stuff here. Now, I just downloaded the latest version, 3.1, so I'll give you a tour of it. As you can see, I am on a Mac, and as far as I know, the builds are fairly easy for Linux, and really easy for Windows, because you get the Windows installer, and then there's also, I guess, add-ins for the Visual Studio, which is really good. So that's fine, but when you're on Mac or Linux, you have to essentially build from source. So when I downloaded it and extracted the files, so let me just show you that. Let me just create a new terminal here. What would happen is, let me just get to where I need to go. Okay, so that's the 3.1. So here is the okay, so let me just see where I'm at. wxWidgets. wx, somewhere in here is the zip fold, the zip. And basically what you do is, obviously you can see the amount of files is it's a huge library, massive. But here's the tar file, or the zip file, for those that are outside of Linux. And what you do is you just untar it, and it will basically expand into this massive file. Let me just do it through the GUI here. So if you take a look at this folder here, basically you'll get all the configuration files. You get the make file, because this is done obviously in C++, and you get a configure file. So what I've done is I've put together a complete list of how to do this for at least Mac, and I think with Linux it should be the same. But from what I'm seeing, it can be easily installed via package managers. So you can look those up if you're using like something like Ubuntu or whatnot. Let me just show you what I've done. So here, I tried the standard GCC compiler. I think I'm using the most recent version. So it's using the Apple LLVM, but that should be okay because that would be similar to Linux. And you just do the standard configure, make install, and that will install. But this will build the libraries, which take a very, very long time. Here, what happens is they get built into here. Okay, so those are the dynamic libraries for OS 10. In my case, you can see here, it's actually under Cocoa. So that's fine, but it takes a long time to build that. So you do that on the in your terminal or shell, and what you need to realize is the destination of where those get created, which is right under here under lib. So these are where your libraries will reside. Now, it gets easier than that once you get past that. There are quite a few samples included as well, but you also want to make note of the headers and where they reside under include wx. So when you open up new wxWidget projects in your IDE, you should be able to point your include headers to this proper folder here under wx. Okay, so remember that location. From there, now we get into Python. Now there is Python builds for wxPython is the package name, and I haven't tried it out. I had problems with it. Tried the standard pip install, but I'm sure it's not too hard to do. But I just want everybody to understand that. Let me just see if I can find the Python. So here's the instructions for that. All these notes will be in my blog posting associated with this video. You can get that in the description of this video on YouTube. So you can get the Python wxPython package, and apparently you can use this within Python, what I'm going to show you. It's pretty cool. Now from there, let me just stop there with the build and the library itself. There is a tool on SourceForge that you can get called wxFormsBuilder. Very similar to Qt Designer. You just see here, if you go under Designer, so I've created a little, this is how it works. You create your forms, one of these, then you create your layout, and then you can add all your different pieces to the layout. Okay, now this is where it gets really cool, is because in this tool, which is open source, you can then convert the code right here. I haven't tested this out yet, but it's probably going to be one of my steps. But not only that, but you can also do Python as well. So that's pretty cool. I haven't tried it out, but you can see it's a class you just import into your Python script, and I'm sure you can get the available examples online somewhere. Okay, so let me just load up my Python here, and I just want to show you the error that you get when you try to import wx. You can see I have this for whatever standard in error, and all I did was just the standard pip, or no, in my case brew install and then ws python. Okay, and that's how I did it. I personally think it's just a different version of wxPython versus, sorry, it's a different Python package, so a compatibility issue versus the Python 2.7 that I'm currently using. I think that's what the issue is. Okay, so that's not a big deal, I think, because I'm going to be moving away from Python. But if you're following this, there is a potential to use this for Python somehow. I'm not really going to explore it. But I just want to show you, I think C++ is my better option, as you know. And then there's this thing called XRC that is part of a sample. set of applications for or components and widgets, I guess, that you can import using this XRC, which is, I'm not sure if it's specific or proprietary to wxWidgets or it's a protocol. I don't know. But I've seen a project on that in the samples. So regarding going back to C++ with the samples are not too bad. Let me just show you some of those. So here, if you go under the library, we have, I'll talk about the demos in a minute, and then we have the samples, which is right here. You got lots and lots of samples here, okay? So if you want a description of the samples, there's this right here. Just try to open that. So here's all the samples available with a description of each one. And when you want to run it, all you got to do, just get out of this one. All you got to do is, let me just, okay, so let me just go into the samples folder. Okay, so here, if you look in the samples folder, you should see a make file. No different than when you build the library itself. Let's see, samples. Okay, let me just stop right here. So here's the make files that you can get. And the generic one that I'm using is GCC, Borland, Visual Studio. And then of course there's the, I think you just go make and that should be it. Okay, and you should be able to, yeah, here's the generic make file. So all you got to do is just do make. Just type in make at this level that you're at, your samples folder, and then because the compiler and all that should be installed, the library or the linker, I just go make, and that's that to create all of the bin files for the samples. So let me show you some of the samples that are available, and some of them are really cool. This is exactly what I was looking for in terms of overall GUI layouts, and there were a bunch that I could easily work off of as role models. So here are some interesting samples. Now, I want to show you a couple that are really, really important for things like HFT. Now, this may be a surprise for you, but I just want to show you one example of that could be very useful for HFT. I don't think you could really use it because this is like an actual framework, so there's going to be a lot of bloat to this library when you include it in your application. But I just want to show you something that I thought is pretty cool. So in here in the sockets example, which we are looking at right, sockets right here, this will explain it all. But the one you want to pay attention to is, so let's say we have a server that we set up. So this is our server right here. And what we can do, wait for connection. Okay, so it's not going to wait for a connection or do a UDP test. Okay, so that's not going to work. So let's do wait for a connection. So there's two different ways of doing this within wxWidgets. We have here we have clients here. We have a base server, which we are base client. I'm not sure which one's the UDP. Okay, so let me just load up the client. Okay, so the client's ready. So here we are. So, okay, so we're connecting. It's waiting to accept. So now I'm in the server. So I'm going to do a UDP test, or let me just datagram test. So there's a TCPI test, which is a standard way to communicate over the network. See here now it's accepted and it's connected into the server, right? So we can run a variety of tests. Test 2, this is now using TCP. Got, okay, and then we just do one more. Okay, so that's using TCP/IP, okay? So the real important one is on the server. We wait for a UDP test. Okay, I guess. Do you want to stop the program? Sure, why not? We'll do it. We'll launch it again. So we want the server relaunched. Okay, so let me try out the UDP on the client and see what happens here. Localhost. Testing with peer at 22. Could not listen to. Okay, so something's going on. I had it working before. So let me try waiting UDP test. UDP test begins. Okay, let's see what happens. There you go. So there's our UDP. And what it really does is a different way of sending data on the same system, or actually the system it is communicating differently than through TCP/IP. So what it's doing is it's sending over a block of memory. Remember this, a block of memory, okay, into the server. So it's a different way to send over from one client into the server, and now you're sending in large, and you can send in large blocks of memory like megabyte, or not megabytes, gigabytes. Apparently that's what I've learned. So you can do this through wxWidget. So I'm not sure, but just an example, that's something you could pursue if you really want to be able to transfer a block of memory, like large blocks, like gigabytes, and it's done within seconds. So I don't know how big this was sent over, but this is how a lot of the HFT shops do this, send blocks of memory from one process to another. So now that you can do this through UDP, it's just an example how they do it. But so you may want to look at that example, okay? Just bringing that up. Okay, so now let's take a look at some of the GUI stuff that I mentioned earlier. All right, so we have our first one, which I'll take a look at, called layout. And there's a couple actually, and these are pretty good. They're different. So let me just load up the layout. So it's a very simple one, typical one that we see. Label, another label, test 2 buttons in a box, whoop-de-doo, okay? So get this, I don't know even know what it really is. Notebook sizers, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so there's that. Very simple one. Okay, so the next one we can take is the MDI. So this one right here is, where's my MDI XQ? This one right here. A little more modern, I guess, that I've seen other GUIs. This is like when you have torrent clients, that sort of thing. Some of the more popular programs or applications have this. So, you know, you can do whatever. So has all the basic functionality, log of what you're doing. You know what I mean? Pretty good, pretty cool stuff. This also I liked. So this I don't know what it's really doing, but hide. So add a password and help topic. So it's like a universal find, I guess. So we'll leave it at that. Full screen. Okay. Okay, so that one. Now, this one's another one. And we got sash test splitter. Just some different effects here. I just want to show you. These are a lot more in line with what I was wanting compared to Qt, without hopefully less restriction. Shaped. So we got here shape. Okay, so we have show shaped window. Oh yes, this is the different window effects. If you want to throw people off, I guess you can do that. Yeah, whatever. Okay, so there's that. Splitter's another kind of another layout example that you could use. So we've seen these before. So I'm going to leave it at that. I think you kind of get the idea. But the other useful layout that you could use is ribbons, similar to what you got in one of the versions from Office from Microsoft. So let me just pull that up. That's pretty well it in terms of layouts. Where's my, here we are. This one's probably the most useful because here you could put in tabs, no different than you get in no different than you get in other like Office or Windows interfaces. So it's kind of useful, I think. But thought I'd show these to you. The code is all there, as you can imagine. Break this. Okay, so that's that. These are some of the other ones that are pretty cool. That could be useful, but there's quite a few. And I did talk about the demos. Now, under the demos, they're not much to brag about. We got different little games here: Life, Bombs, 40, a fractal that's displayed, and that's pretty well it. I'll just show you the 40. You know, some card game or something. It's kind of like a solitaire, I guess. So there's that. Now the next step is for me is of all the IDEs that I've seen, I was wanting to get this built in CodeBlocks, but CodeBlocks is really buggy. It crashes a lot. I mean, it crashes a lot, especially when you're working with wxWidgets. So it's something I wouldn't recommend. But I found some cool resources that may be useful for some people. This one looks really good. This Max Burger name blah 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 one, and that might be useful to set up your Eclipse. So there's that to set it up. And obviously within the Eclipse as the IDE for C++. And we're not talking about Eclipse Java IDE, we're talking about the Eclipse CDT. So when you go into eclipse.org, what you're looking for is IDE tools and this one, the C++ one. So it's called Eclipse IDE for C++ developers, and you're going to use that one. That's probably the one I might use because it's free, it's solid. Well, it's not the best IDE, but it's the most stable of all that I've seen that are free without needing to go out and buy C-Line. So there's that, and I think that's pretty well it. You may run into some problems with wxWidgets on your build. Depends upon your Mac OS 10 version, but the Windows looks pretty straightforward, especially if you're using Visual Studio, and the Linux shouldn't be as hard. But to be honest, the supposedly the hardest one would be uh, Mac, and it was not difficult at all because all I had to do, as I said, was just to just show you what, again, to recap. Okay, so if you have here configure, so you have this configure set of files, you just go first configure, that'll set up your environment. Okay, and then the next one, supposedly you should be using this make install, but they seem to work okay. But I need to now take a look at how these examples are built out. For instance, let me just pull one up like sound or something. So if I look at the make file for this project here, you can see how it works, everything resides, and you should be able to hopefully build a makefile from this and build my own for my own project with wxWidgets. So I just want to show you this, and I guess it's sooner or later going to be saying goodbye to Qt. It's as I said, it's just way too restrictive. And another thing I forgot to mention about Qt that really got to me was if you're going to use the SQL, you want to, let's say, use the MySQL driver for Qt, you have to build the driver yourself. So it's not like you get in I don't know, Visual Studio or something else where you have the pre-compiled library you have to build from source, and the documentation is so scant in showing you how to do it. It's a joke, and I think they do that on purpose because it's their freemium model. So the free edition of the Qt, they make it as crippled as possible. And if you buy, let's say, the Pro, you don't have. I would imagine you don't have those issues. And if you did, God help them, because I wouldn't spend $2,500 for one license for that mess. So far, what I see of the wxWidget seems to be okay. And hopefully it'll alleviate all the other weird problems that I've seen as well. And hopefully I'll help you out. Talk to you later.